Hello and welcome to Harvest to You. I'm Pastor Marc, and it is a joy to have you with us today. Listen, before we start the sermon today, I want you to know about harvesttoyou.org. This is a space where you can find additional resources like sermons and devotionals, even a book I recently wrote. It's also a space where you can request prayer. I know that life can be hard, even lonely sometimes, and you just need someone to come alongside you. We would love for harvesttoyou.org to be a spot where you can find equipping, resources, and even prayer for your life.
Go to Matthew chapter number 6 this morning. As you turn there, I'm going to put a picture on the screen. This is a picture of Alfred Nobel, and he is a man who had one of the strangest experiences imaginable. He was later on in his life a brilliant Swedish chemist, the man who invented dynamite. He literally blew his way up to wealth, and he was able to read his own obituary in the newspaper. There was a local newspaper who mistakenly thought that he died. Alfred's brother, Ludwig, had died, but somehow they got it conflated, and they wrote an obituary for Alfred, and the title of the obituary was, "The Merchant of Death is Dead." It's not exactly what you want to read over your morning coffee, but there it was, right in front of him in black and white. And he read about not a brilliant man, not a man who was an amazing scientist, not a man who was an inventor, but he was remembered by this newspaper as a man who got rich by helping people kill each other with his dynamite. He did not like what he read, and the moment rattled him. The fact that his legacy would be remembered as such, that this would be his story, and he decided to rewrite his story. Alfred died 8 years later, but when he died, he left pretty much all of his money. This is in the late 1800s, and it was millions and millions and millions of dollars back then, some $9 million he left. And that inheritance, or that money, was meant to establish a series of prizes for those who advanced research, literature, and peace. You may have heard of those prizes. A Nobel Prize would be the name of it. But it started with a man who looked at his life and his money, and he said, is what I'm doing with my life and what I'm doing with my money, does it matter? What is it amounting to? And he decided to change his story from being the merchant of death to being the patron of peace. And he decided to be a far more generous person because he wanted his legacy to be so. I mention all of that because on the docket for today is the topic of generosity. We are looking at the practices of Jesus, both practices of engagement, that we really go do something. We'll look next month. Next month starts a holiday season. And next week, actually, we'll get to pull out our Christmas lights. If you're anything like me and you celebrate Christmas once November starts, that's the spiritual way to do it, by the way. But that will mark in our minds a season of joy and festive and holidays for sure, but also a season of busyness. And we're going to look at some practices of abstinence, of slowing down and simplifying and even fasting in the month of Thanksgiving, believe it or not. But for today, we're going to look at the practice of generosity. And I want to start with just a very simple statement of what Jesus taught about generosity. If you were to take his teaching, which is expansive on the subject, and to really compress it down into a little terse phrase, this would be the phrase that you would come up with. It's in Acts chapter number 20, where we're told to remember the words of the Lord Jesus. Well, what words should we remember? Here they are. He said, it's more blessed to give than it is to receive. That word blessed is the Greek word makarios. It means happy. It means good fortune. It means well off. It means that there's more joy and there's more happiness, and you will be better off if you are on the give than if you are on the gain. When you have a life of generosity, it is good for you. It is blessings for you. And I want to take this sort of concept that it is more blessed to give than to receive, And I'm going to try for us to look more closely at what Jesus said about generosity and get this concept into our head, then into our heart, and then into our hands. Now, I'm going to tell you up front, that's a lot of tasks for a pastor on one sermon, okay? But I got to get you to understand what he said first and just know what he said. I don't even have to get you to agree with it first. Just know what he said. Then I'm going to try my darndest to get you, should you say darndest in a sermon? I just thought that. I don't know if you should. I'm going to try my best to get you to agree with it in your heart and to feel that it's good. And then I'm going to try to get you to do something with your hands and to put it into practice. So let's start with the head. Let's start our journey there. 25% of Jesus' teaching was on money. That's a lot. If I gave you 1 out of every 4 sermons on money, you would probably want to fire me. You would not like that. But Jesus talked about money a lot, and it makes sense when you think about it because so many of our decisions day in and day out are in regards to money. I'm not going to go to that gas station. I'll go to the next one because they have 3 cents cheaper on the gallon. I'll save some money. What do I want to spend at the grocery store? Cost comparing, paying the bill. So much of our mental bandwidth is dedicated to money and how we're spending it. And honestly, so much emotional energy, sometimes negative emotional energy, is spent on money. Fearing that we won't have enough. Desiring for more than we need. And if you pay attention to the teaching of Jesus on money, it can loosen the world's grip on your heart when it comes to money. It can loosen the grip of fear. It can loosen the grip of greed. And I don't know if you're excited or not to know what Jesus has to say about money. My assumption is that most of you would be because most of you are Christians in the room. But I do understand that even some Christians get to topics on money and they don't really want to hear what Jesus has to say for a variety of reasons. Perhaps it's just some sort of guilt that they're not, prone to be as generous as they'd like to be. Perhaps it's fear that they don't have enough and they just kind of wish they had more resources so they could contribute more. Perhaps it's some sort of apprehension because some pastor or church leader or televangelist misused and abused Jesus' teaching and put a negative taste in your mouth when it comes to Jesus and money. But I want you to try to take any negative emotions you would have and set them to the side for a minute and just listen with an open heart and an open mind. You don't even have to agree. I just want you to hear what he has to say about money. And here it is in Matthew chapter number 6. It's not all that he said on money, but it's a good starting place. This is the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus' most famous, prolific, and longest teaching. And he has a section on it that's on money. And here's what he says in verse 19. He says, you can't take your treasure with you, but you can store it up. You can send it ahead. Verse 19, lay not up for yourself treasures upon earth, where moth and rust does corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust does corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. Now note, Jesus doesn't rebuke our impulse to store up treasure. He never says that's a bad idea or you should completely reorient your heart. There's something in us where we like to have some savings, we like to have a rainy day account, we like to have some investments, some assets. There's something in us that we desire that. And he says, I don't want you to not have treasure. He never says that. No treasure. No. What he says is, I want you to allocate your treasure in the right spot. And he speaks to temporal versus eternal. Now, on some level, I think we can get this because most financial planners will speak into this in some way, shape, or form. Financial planners will tell you, you don't need to be thinking 3 weeks ahead. You don't even need to be thinking 3 years ahead. You need to be thinking 30 years ahead. You need to be thinking about the investment and what that will mature into over the course of time and being prepared for your retirement. So let's get out a little further and try to make some money decisions based off of that sort of runway, a decade or multi-decade long runway. All Jesus is doing is say, time out, why'd you stop at 30 years? Why'd you stop that planning for like your 60s or your 70s or your kid's college fund? Why don't we go out further than that? Why don't we go 300 years? Why don't we go 3,000 years? And if we're going out that far, he's saying, invest in things that are eternal. Sow into God's work in the world. Sow into the kingdom of God. And see if there aren't eternal dividends. And listen to what he says. Those eternal dividends are not risky. There's some measure of fear in our heart when we make investments in the here and now, because we know that just like we could get a windfall to the positive, we could get a windfall to the negative. That could all be taken away. That company could go belly up. That investment may not be a good investment. That asset I may invest in a house and it collapses. And here's what he's saying. Think about this in the long term. Think about where you're putting your stuff and have an eternal mindset in regard to your stuff. Verse number 21, you can't move your money without moving your heart. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. You can bank on this truth. We come to love and even worry and even obsess over where we put our money. If you were gifted 10,000 shares of Tesla stock this week by some long-lost aunt who left you an inheritance, not only would that be a good day financially for you, you would immediately become a little more in tune with what's happening in Tesla. You may go buy a Tesla as your next car. If there was an article about what the company's doing and what new venture they were partaking in, you would read that. You would be more acutely aware of that. You would care more. Why? Because you had an investment there, so your heart will follow it. It is true that where your heart is, your treasure will be to some degree. That if you love someone and have a concern for someone and your heart is there, that you'll want to give to them and give to them. That's true. But the flip side of that coin is true as well, that where you put your money, your heart is in tow. This is very helpful for people who say, listen, Pastor, I'm a Christian and I know I'm supposed to love the work of God. I'm supposed to care about missions. It's been missions month. But if I'm honest with you, I don't care that much. I mean, it's not that I don't care at all, but I don't get enthused in the same way that other people get enthused. I wish I did, but I don't know. I don't. I can't fake it. I'm just not that into it. Can I help you? You have more control over if you're enthused or not than you think. Because when you put your treasure or your money or an investment somewhere or a missions commitment or a chunk of money in a missions offering, guess what? Your heart will follow it. Sometimes we think, I need to be enthused, therefore I can give. But the opposite is oftentimes true. If you give, you might be enthused. Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Verse number 22, he goes on to say, one of my favorite portions of scripture on money. I've never preached a sermon on these two verses and bank on it. I will sometime in the not too distant future. Not too distant future, meaning like 5 years. But I'm going to preach a whole sermon on these two verses one day, because you may think they have nothing to do with money, and they have everything to do with money. And it's brilliant. It's brilliant. Jesus is going to say very simply that generosity will light up your whole life. Verse 22, the light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. But if thine eye be evil, thy whole body shall be full of darkness. And if therefore the light that's in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? Now, that may sound cryptic. That may sound like he just changed the subject. He did not change the subject. Jesus is leveraging what was a very common Jewish colloquialism that had existed literally for well over 1,000 years. There is an evil eye in Scripture. Whole study we could do on that, but I'm going to give you the Cliff Note version today. An evil eye is a stingy eye or a greedy eye. If you read Proverbs, it will tell you that if you sit down with someone to eat at their dinner table and they have an evil eye, do not eat very much, because they'll say with their lips, go ahead, help yourself. mi casa su casa, what's mine is yours, but they don't mean it in their heart because they have an evil eye. And when you partake and you take out of their cupboard or out of their fridge, they'll resent you for it because they're stingy. It talks about someone who has an evil eye and how they want to be quick to be rich. An evil eye is simply a stingy and a greedy eye. And he says if you have this sort of view on money and the world, there's going to be darkness in your life. But the opposite of an evil eye was a single eye. A single eye you could think of as a healthy eye. It was a healthy view of money in the world. It basically was a generous person. And he's contrasting the stingy, greedy soul with a generous soul. And what he says is that the generous soul is going to be filled with light. That generosity is going to light up your whole life. But if you're stingy and greedy, it will be an extreme detriment and it will add darkness to your life. This is something that actually modern psychiatrists and psychologists have picked up on. They don't describe it in terms of a single eye or an evil eye or even a generous heart or a greedy heart. What they will say is there's an abundance mindset or there's a scarcity mindset, but you're basically talking at the same thing. Someone who would have a biblical filter for an abundance mindset, that's not just a secular way of looking at the world, but an abundance mindset through the scriptures, would look at life this way. This would be a good, just kind of bullet point of a single eye. They would say, God is my Father. And God is not only my Father, but He's my provider because I'm His child. In the same way that my children do not worry about where their next meal is coming from, I am God's child, so I don't have to worry about tomorrow. He takes care of the lilies. He feeds the birds, so I can trust in Him. I can rest in Him. I can view life as a gift. Thank you for another day to wake up and to breathe and to walk and to talk. This is a gift that you've given to me, and I have more than enough, God. I believe that you'll provide for me. I've never seen the righteous forsaken, nor his seed begging bread. I will rest in you, and I've learned how to be abased and not to have a lot, and I've learned how to abound and have a lot, but either way, you take care of me, and I have more than enough, and so I have gratitude towards you in my heart, and I'm generous towards other people. That's a healthy view, right? You're viewing the world through a filter that is there is enough, and God will provide to me, and I can be on the give. Then there's an evil eye or a scarcity mindset, which does not have God as a father or a provider. You're on your own. You better figure it out. And if you don't figure out, you're going to be hosed. The world's a dangerous place. It's dog eat dog out there. If you're not careful, you're going to run out of resources. And because you're on your own and the world is dangerous, you should be scared. And you should hold on to what you have with everything that you got. You better get while the getting's good. And it starts to produce this fear, greedy heart. And what Jesus is trying to do is he's trying to move people over towards a generous heart. And he's trying to tell them, your life will be better. Your life will be better if you'll move towards that. Verse number 24, this isn't all he says on money. If you want to keep reading in your own time, you can go beyond 24, but I'll leave it here. He gives what I call a no moonlighting policy. If you've ever worked for an employer who had a no moonlighting policy, you know what this is. If you haven't, let me educate you. A no moonlighting policy is you are the full-time employee of this company and you cannot go have gainful employment where you punch a clock for another employer. You can't work part-time for them. You may have a little side hustle. You may have an investment. You may flip a house, but you can't go work for another employer. You work for us and us alone. It's their way of ensuring that your heart and your time and your mind and your energy are focused on them, and they suppose that they've paid you enough to do such. And what God says is this: he has a no moonlighting policy. No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will hold to the one and despise the other. You can't serve God and mammon. Mammon being the ancient Syrian god of wealth. I know that's a word we don't use very commonly, but they knew what he was talking about. You can't have a god of wealth and me as your God. You can't do that. You can't go part-time me, part-time money. It's not going to work. Your heart is not a duplex. God and money can't share it. It's a throne, and one person has to sit on it. And he's speaking to the gravitational pull of money on your life, that you'll want to worship it and serve it. And he says, listen, trust me and serve me. Be a generous person and see if it doesn't light up your life. Be eternally minded with your investments and see if your heart doesn't follow your money when you put your money in things that are eternal in nature. That's what he says. Now here's my task. Not just to get you to understand what he said, but to push it into your heart and for you to say, I believe that, and I'd like to try to act on it. When you take all this teaching, the apostles summed it up as, it's better to give than to receive. That was their summary of Jesus' teaching on money. Is that true? Should you live by that? Is there more happiness in giving than there is getting? Are you happier when you do that? This goes against the American psyche big time, because the American psyche is get all you can, pile up as much as you can, have a cupboard that's full and an attic that's full and a garage that's full and a 2-car garage that's full, and just fill them up and more and more and more. Richard Foster went so far to call our American mindset on money and affluence. He said there's a psychotic lust for affluence that has completely lost touch with reality. That's how he summed up the American mind on money. There's all sorts of research that talks about generous people and what possesses their life. Generous people are, according to research, happier, healthier, less depressed, less anxious, better relationships, have a higher life expectancy, and they laugh more. That's an amazing thing when you think, is there something in life that could make me less depressed and less anxious and make me have better relationships and laugh more and just live longer? What is that? Where's that pill? Well, generosity, social scientists tell us, is the pill. I know some of you might think, really? It feels really good when I get money. Like, when I get a raise, it feels fantastic. Like, it makes me happy. If I find $100 on the ground, like, that's the best day of my year. Like, it's a free hundo. I understand that there's some sort of like, if you love getting and receiving gifts, and gifts is your love language, it may feel good to you, it may be loving to you, but you're always going to get more out of it when you're on the give. If you doubt this and you say, whatever, Jesus said that it's more blessed to give. Social scientists say that it is too, I don't know if I believe it. Okay, think about this. I want you right now to picture in like your mind's eye the most generous person that you know. Not like Mother Teresa, who you've never met or something like that, right? I want you to picture someone who you know personally who is like, they are a generous person, okay? I want you to get them in there. I want you to get that name locked in. How many of you raise of hands, you have a name locked in your mind's eye right now? Apparently, I need to give you 20 more seconds, okay? I'm going to fill the void for 20 seconds while you think of a name as best I can. All right, how many of you got a name now? Apparently, you need 20. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to do that to you. Okay? You got the name, you got the person, right? All right, here's the question to answer. You ready? That generous person you got, are they a happy person? I'm willing to bet my whole sermon that the answer to that question is yes. Why would I bet my sermon on that? Because it's more blessed to give than it is to receive. It's a universal truth. I've never met a formerly generous person. I've met formerly greedy people, formerly stingy people, formerly a worrywart who worried about money incessantly. But I've never met, maybe they exist out there. If that's you, I guess I'd like to meet you. But I've never met a formerly generous person. Because once someone experiences the joy and the light of life that comes into their soul from being generous, they don't want to stop. They almost unlock life to a degree, and they don't go back. Generosity is something that when Jesus tells you it's going to add light to your whole life, when he tells you it's blessed and it's happy, he knew what he was talking about. The people that you know are generous know it to be true. The social scientists know it to be true. And Christians should just know it to be true because Jesus said it. It's more blessed to give than to receive. So if by chance this is in your heart at any measure right now, it's now my task to get it into your hands. Because you can know what Jesus says. You can even believe it to be true and have a desire to be a generous person. But if you don't practice it and it never makes its way to your hands, you will not experience the joy. The challenge is not to know or to feel. The challenge is actually to do. And I'm going to give you some action points this morning. And I'm going to ask you to have a bias toward action because this is where the rubber actually meets the road. And I think this is where the disconnect is for many American Christians. It's not that American Christians don't know about generosity or that we should be, or they hear stories, or there's a lack of sermons on the topic. That's not the issue. The issue is that it doesn't actually connect itself to our day-to-day life. Here are a few stats from the American church as of late. These are from 2023 from Barna. 5% of churchgoers say that they tithe, meaning 10% of their income or greater is given away. Now, out of that 5%, 77% of those go well beyond a tithe. The people who have gotten up to that level, the vast majority of them actually go beyond it because they find this principle to be true, that there was a lot of joy associated with what they were doing. On average, Christians in the U.S., you say if very few tithe, then how much do they give? Well, here's the national average. Christians give 2.5% of their income away to the church. Now, mind you, that's less than it was during the Great Depression, okay? If you're like, is that great? No, the trend line is down. It's not going in the right direction. Most churches, 80% of the generosity comes from about 20% of the members. Those are all stats that indicate that somehow there's a disconnect between what Jesus said and people knowing it. Either they don't know or they don't feel that it's true, or maybe they know and feel that it's true, but they're just not doing it. And I don't want that to be true for you or for us. I would like us to practice what Jesus said. So if it's not about information, that's not the problem. The problem's not information. The problem is more application. Let me be very specific and let me try to apply this. Now, I'm going to warn you up front. If you apply the practice of generosity to your life, it will cost you. Like literally, it's impossible for it not to. But you will gain more than you give. There will be a return on that cost or on that investment that is well worth it. Last note before I get practical is you could talk about generosity from a variety of filters. We could talk about money, we could talk about our time, we could talk about being generous with our encouragement and love. We could talk about generosity in a variety of ways, and those would all be valid. But generosity, while it is more than money, it's never less than money. And today's sermon, the scope of it is focused specifically on the money part, to be honest. So let me give you one graphic that I think will make this practical for every single person in the room. At least that's my hope and my goal. You may be familiar with this. This graphic has existed in churches for a long time. I don't think I've ever showed it to you, but it's a good graphic. This is a giving ladder. I like the giving ladder for a couple reasons. Number one, the giving ladder intimates that generosity is a progression and it steps on a journey. It's a climb. It's not just a leap. Many times the reason that this is unapplicable for Christians is they think I either have to give half my income away, and if I don't, then there's no generosity, and I can't give half my income away, so like I'm just not going to do anything. And there's never maybe stages or clear steps that are laid out. And I think this does a wonderful job of that, of helping you identify where you are and just say, take one step. Wherever you're at, take one step. Now, if you want to try to take 3 steps, I'm not going to argue with you, but I would recommend at least trying to take one. So step 1 would be you just give, and I'm going to talk in the context of our local church. You can give outside of our local church. You certainly can. You can be generous in a wide variety of other ways, but because we're in church, I'm the pastor of this church, I'm going to make this applicable via the church. And most Christians that I meet, their real generosity pattern started via their local church. It's very rare that I meet someone that it didn't start through their local church. So here we go. If you're like, hey, I've never, given to my local church, to this place, then a good step for you would just be like, well, then do that. Like one time. Today we have an offering. On the back of your missions bulletin, there are 4 different $8,000 needs. Today, our hope, our goal, our prayer is to have an additional $32,000 come in via the offering that will go to these projects. If you've never given, I would encourage you, then give to this today. You can do it online. It's very clear on our website, or there's a little offering envelope in all the seat backs, and just write in there in the missions tab, however much you're given, a cash check, whatever it is, and give to that and take that step. Now, I know that many of you do this because I actually get a report every month that tells me different numbers and data points in the church. And one of the numbers, it's not names, it's just a number, how many people gave for the first time last month. And I looked back at my last 12 months of reports, and 101 of you made that step of giving to this place for the first time ever in your life over the last 12 months. I don't know how many of you would be here that need to take that step today, but there's for sure a handful, and I'm going to prompt you, go do that. Now, if you've taken that step, you've been there, done that. 3 months ago, I put $10, in the offering. I've checked that box. Okay. Next step would be a sporadic giver, an occasional giver. Someone who, it's not just one time. I'll do this, but it's just kind of when I feel prompted, When I have an extra 50 in my pocket, when the sermon was good, whatever it is, when you're doing a missions offering and you tell us, we should give in that offering, then I'll give to that. I'm not consistently going to do anything monthly or biweekly or every paycheck or every week. But, when the Lord prompts my heart, I'll give something. And that's a beautiful step. You'll definitely have drops of joy that come in your life from that. You'll begin to experience some of the benefits of generosity from that. I want to be upfront with you. You're not going to experience loads of joy on that one. Like there's not going to be joy bombs that just drop on your head from that, because it's not a pattern enough. It's not a behavior or a discipline or a practice enough yet, but it's at least a good step. And if you're an occasional giver, once again, there's a practical step for you today with our missions offering. Like at the end of this service, before we say bye-bye to you, we're going to pass some plates, and I would encourage you to put something in there for the missions offering today. A step after that would be a consistent giver. Now this may be much smaller perhaps than a tithe or 10% of your income, but you begin to give consistently. You'll start to really see some effects if you start to do this. If you begin to plan, to prioritize, to literally budget like a line item, that is this amount of money every check, or this amount of money every month, or this amount of money every week, then this will begin to have a consistent effect on you, and you'll really go up a notch. You'll begin to experience a lot more of what Jesus said when he says that there's blessings when you give rather than being on the get. And that consistency is something that is kind of at the heartbeat of our missions month this month. If you're new, then you can set this to the side to some degree. But for those of you that are regulars here, we have these cards. And these cards are designed to prompt you into giving something on maybe some sort of recurring basis. And we leave that between you and the Lord. There's no names on these. These are all anonymous. But it's designed to perhaps get you in a pattern of, I want to give $5 every week to missions, or I want to give $500 every week to missions, whatever it is. It's designed to be provocative in that way and to create a pattern. I would also recommend, if this is something that you struggle with, and let's just take a trip to the Honest Planet real quick. Most of us do struggle with this. There's a lot of things that we can spend our money on, and to intentionally say, I'm going to put that there consistently, that I'm going to give away, even in December when there's a lot of Christmas gifts to buy, and even in June when I want to take that vacation, and even when that's not easy to do. And one of the best tools I could recommend to you is just setting up recurring giving. We have that through our website as a way for you to actually make this a habit and a rhythm, and you can choose whatever you want at whatever increment you want, whatever time frame, weekly, bi-weekly, and you can actually prioritize it almost like a bill pay sort of thing, because it will make it a pattern. So once you're giving consistently, the next step up on the ladder, and this is really where you're gonna probably put some faith into it. Most people, when they take this step, it is a tremendous step of faith for most people, to be honest. But when you take this step of faith, you will loosen the grip of fear and greed when it comes to money in your life in ways that I cannot explain to you. You just have to do it. When you say, I'm going to take a percentage of my income, like a tithe, like 10%, and I'm going to give God, not my crumbs left over, but I'm going to give him a slice of the pie, and I'm going to do that consistently, that is undoubtedly, for most people, a step of faith that is a God, I don't know how that's exactly going to work out, because all of us have things that we could spend the money on or save the money for. We all do. But to say, I'm going to trust you in that way, it starts to have a dynamic in your soul that is irreplaceable when you're trusting God by faith in that way. And what the data tells us is that the vast majority of people who get to that level, 77% of them to be precise, go beyond it because they begin to experience that God provides for you. And God opens up the windows of heaven and he pours out blessings on you when you're trusting him in this way. And that's actually the next step, is actually just a real heart of generosity. It'd be beyond tithing, but it'd be just generous, just very intentionally. I know people that give 90% of their income away. I know people that give 50% of their income away. I know people that give 20% of their income away because they just want to be generous. And they say, I got enough to live with this. The rest of it, I want to sow into the kingdom, and I want eternal rewards. Now, I don't know where you're at on that ladder. You're somewhere on it, I can tell you that much, but I don't know where you're at. But wherever you're at, here is a way that I'm trying my best to get it into your hands. And not just a concept that you learn about and you nod your head to, but something you actually do to make this a practice. To give one time in an offering, to give recurring in some way, to have a missions commitment where you're giving weekly to missions, or there's a tithe challenge on here. That may be your step that's like, all the mission stuff, nope, I just need to try tithing for 60 days and trust God with that. I think that there's enough action items for all of us that we can take this and make it practical. So, don't overanalyze it. Think about where you're at and think about where you want to be. I hope that you've already done that. I know my wife and I have come into today. Like, I love this day, to be honest. I don't always love preaching on money because it can be a tender topic for people, if I'm truthful. But I love this day. I love to see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Operation Christmas Child shoeboxes pour in and us be able to give them away. I love being able to say, hey, collectively, what do we want to do with missions this year? And this card is both a way for us to know what that is and plan. These cards are very helpful to us internally to know how can we budget and plan and prepare for the year. But they're also helpful for you in that they bring you to a point of decision. And some people don't like that, but I make no apologies for it. It makes you think, am I going to fill it out or not? Am I going to participate or not? If I am, what am I going to put on there? And I think that's very healthy and helpful for a lot of Christian Americans who get all kinds of sermons and ideas about generosity but sometimes struggle to implement them. So today as a congregation, let's implement them. I'm going to ask you to take out these cards. I'm going to pray in a minute that God would bless us and bless us this year as we come to the culmination of our missions month. Next week, we're going to celebrate. We're going to let you know how much money came in for the projects and how much money came in via our commitments, and we're going to celebrate it. But right now, I want you to take this out if you haven't already, and I want you to fill it out while I pray. And after I do, Marley from Medical Missions is going to come give us a few words about what they do. We are taking a trip with Medical Missions in June. We want you guys to hear about that. And these guys are going to come and they're going to pass some plates around. I want to say this, and I will be done. If you don't put something in there, no one's going to judge you. And if you are prone to judge, let me remind you, some people make their commitments online. Some people give online, okay? So no one's going to judge you. This is not intended to be undue pressure. That's like someone next to you better see you drop a 20 in that plate. Okay, let's not get weird about it, but let's get honest about it, that it's good for us to come to a point of decision and to have something very practical and tangible and how we can integrate the practice of generosity into our lives.
It's my prayer that today's message challenged and encouraged you in your walk with Christ. If this sermon was a blessing to you, know that it was made available because of our financial partners. I want to take a moment and invite you to be a part of that tribe. I know not everyone's in a position to give, and if that's you, then just let this broadcast be a blessing, no strings attached. But if God's blessed you with the ability to give, I would love for you to link arms with us and support what God is doing here. As a small way of saying thank you for your generosity, I'd love to send you a copy of my new book, The Prayer Jesus Gave. This is a guided tour through the model prayer, what some would call the Our Father. And if you've ever felt like your prayer life could use an upgrade, I know it will be a help. You can give and receive your copy at harvesttoyou.org/give or by mailing a donation to the address on your screen. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. We'll see you next Sunday.